gaps. Ladies and a few gentlemen in the room, gaps. That's actually the subject of today's speech. Great subject. All I see are gaps. Or I feel totally surrounded by gaps. How is that? Well, I do believe that I overcame many of those gaps in my life. But before outlining the most significant gaps that escorted me through life or have still an impact on my daily routine, I would like to talk shortly about myself to then specifically tackle 3 gaps. We will do this a little bit interactively so you won't be bored, because from time to time I have to watch my English, so watching my manuscript. Are you ready? Well, I'm sure you're going to be able to isolate those 3 main gaps that we are going to talk about tonight. First, I start shortly with my biography, and you're going to be immediately able to isolate the first big gap. We are going to dedicate most of my speaking time of tonight. I was born in a country that did not have the female, or not know the female right, voting right, by the year I was born, which is not a secret because it's written in the biography, okay? So it took Switzerland until 1971 until the right to be voted or elected or to vote was granted to the Swiss women. And even more scarily so, in 1999, the last of our 26 cantons was actually forced by the federal court to finally give the other half, as they used to call it, of the population the right, of the full equal rights. Okay? Well, I won't bore you too long about the socio-cultural environment I was born in, but let me tell you, we lived in a peaceful suburb of the city of Basel. My childhood neighborhood would be a perfect set for desperate housewives. Good Swiss women wouldn't work. And actually, my mother was the only mother of all my classmates in primary school who would work. We're talking about the 70s, and despite the oil crisis, Switzerland was prosperous. It was an economic success story. There was a huge middle class, something that is going to disappear now even in Switzerland, but this is not the subject of tonight. And the perfect family would have a head of family, which was the man, who would earn the life. And the mantra for women was what we call in German, and I know that many of you do speak German, Kinder, Küche, Kirche, which is children, kitchen, church. Okay? So far for the atmosphere back home. 11 women had been elected to the first mixed parliament. 11 out of 246. Today there are 67, a kind of proud 27%. Before I go on with my storytelling of gender backwardness in the heart of Europe, and I'm sure you already guessed the first gap we are going to isolate tonight, let me hint at the second gap that I would like to deepen. Just facts. Turkey gave the voting right to women on a municipal level in 1933. In 1934, you got universal rights, as we call them. In 1935, 17 women entered the Turkish parliament. Today, there are 79 Turkish female parliamentarians in Ankara. By the way, in 71, when we finally became equal, the first female Turkish minister entered in the executive. Today, there are 14% of women in the Turkish parliament. Got my second gap issue? I'll come back to it later. Let's go back to my country and allow me to tell you an anecdote. I wasn't exactly very bad at school, and teachers, which were all men, of course, except the art teacher, they would like me and they would try to encourage me, and then they would ask me, what do you want to become one day, and I'll tell them, well, either an astronaut or a diplomat. And then they would look at me like very sorrowful, and then this expression in their faces, like in Turkish, you would go like, ay canım benim maalesef, They are both not for women. Well, when I graduated from high school, I wrote to the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs, telling them, send me everything I need to know about becoming a diplomat. It took them 3 days to send me whole packaging, It's a very efficient state, you know this all. And it was very interesting, it was good, it was very helpful, but there was one article that I have to mention here. We are talking about 1986. The article said, should you be a woman, you know, I mean, who would think that a woman would actually order this documentation? Should you be a woman, you have to know that this profession is something that is going to englobe your life, you know, and you cannot marry or have children. And it's not a joke. In 1988, Switzerland changed this rule, and only since 1988, female diplomats have the right to be married and to have a family. It's useless to tell you that male Swiss diplomats, of course, could marry, and they could also marry foreigners. I went then to university and got my degree in political science, then went on specializing on developing countries, stayed in Indonesia 1 year for field research, came back, worked in development issue. Actually, I was the motor of the fair trade movement in Switzerland. In 1995, I passed the exams to become a diplomat, and I started in 96. We were 5 women and 18 men. 3 women are still in the picture, and I think 17 men are still in the picture. You might wonder why I focus on certain numbers and details, but I think you are going to realize later on. 1998, I became the spokesperson of the Foreign Ministry, and 1999, I had my first son. I worked until Friday evening, and I gave birth on Saturday. I traveled until I was 8 months pregnant. You will wonder how. Well, with the government plane, because no airline would take you. And my last trip was actually very pregnant, was to Kosovo, where we had a war in 1999. Why do I tell you this? I tell you this because I was probably one of the first, I was not the first, but I was among the first female Swiss diplomats who became pregnant, and which is nothing very exciting. But the thing I want to share with you is I became pregnant. I didn't talk about, you know, I grew bigger every day. People saw me. They saw me even on television because I used to be the spokesperson. And I took it as the most normal thing in life. And because I took it so normally, no one asked me about the pregnancy. No one is like, because they were mostly all men working together with me. You know, it was just normal. Okay, now we have women, they work, they become pregnant, they don't talk about it, they work normally. So it was a very interesting thing for me. Well, then I had a 4 months maternity leave, and I'm sure you're not surprised if I tell you that those 4 months of maternity leave is a very recent achievement for Swiss women. I went back to work in Bern, our capital city. The problem is that the baby and the father, they lived 4 train hours away. Now, you're going to ask me, you must be kidding, how can you stay 4 hours in a train in Switzerland without going out of the country? Well, you can. I left the baby with the father 4 train hours away. And now we are not going to talk about men, but I think it was quite a challenge because the father had a career also, and there were no daycare structures 13 years ago in Switzerland. So he had to manage the most incredible things, you know, between family and paying some women and some others. So it was quite a challenge. And I don't want to become too personal, but it became very difficult. Talked to my minister, who said, you work too much, you have to get a transfer. So when the baby was 1 year old, I came together with the baby to Ankara and got remarried. I was posted in the embassy in Ankara. You understood, you can read on the paper. Then the whole family moved to Rome. From Rome, we moved to Israel. And from Israel, I came here in September 2011 to this amazing country, which is the homeland of my husband and whose language everyone in my family speaks except myself. And there I want to switch to the third gap before starting to provoke you a little or a little more, and trying to show you that gaps force us sometimes to see the world in black and white, whereas I very much believe in gray zones. So I came back to this country that I admire so much. You wouldn't believe what I did to come back here. I mean, it was my biggest wish, and it was not so easy, but here we are. Well, and what do I find? A societal gap that seems to me insuperable. I found a divided country. I'm provoking you with gaps. I'm not going to mention the Turkish success story of the last 10 years. We are here among us and we talk about gaps, and it's all about provoking you a little. So a divided country. split in a Galatasaray fan club and a Fenerbahce fan club, to speak symbolically or to use man's language. Here the new elite, there the old one. No constructive criticism, incomprehension, fear. I have the chance to talk a lot. I mean, it's part of my profession, you know. I have to talk to a lot of people I want to understand. I want to understand this country. I have to dig into things. And I, of course, especially love to talk to women. And I think that the gap of incomprehension might even be bigger among the women. I see a divided reality. I provoked you enough? You got my 3 gaps? The gender gap, of course, you know, which I tried to carefully illustrate, speaking about where I come from. The cultural gap, which I insinuated when comparing Turkish and Swiss figures. And the third one, the societal gap, which is what I see here and which I think has to be overcome as soon as possible. But actually, I should teach you something, right? Well, I'm not sure I succeed, but please let me try. The first one, which is the most important one, especially for me, because you understand where I come from. The gender gap is a reality for all of us. And the glass ceiling, I think, it's a worldwide phenomenon, with the exception of 1 or 2 Scandinavian countries, but well. We would agree that it's still mostly women who have to take care of the family and the household. But we live in a century where we are enabled to act and take our own responsibilities. And it's not easy, because the mainstream still can't accept a woman as the head of the family, as the breadwinner. They can't accept that you give your children away to make a career. They can't even accept that they are invited to dinner at your house and it's your husband who is actually preparing the dinner. But on the other side, you know, they can't even accept that a father travels with babies. I mean, ask my husband, the most funniest experiences he had. And you must know it, because in each and every airport, maybe it's now changing, but like 10 years ago, the Pampers changing station, it's inside the female toilet. Oh. You know, the mainstream can't even accept that when I go to a meeting with one of my male staff members, you know, that they have to address me because I happen to be the boss. It's still not so easy. But you know what? We shouldn't care. And the more we don't care, the better it actually gets. This is my own personal experience. You know, by not caring, the mainstream wouldn't like us, but they would respect us. Well, enough of negative things. Enough. Let's switch to some positive messages. Because the good news is that it has improved, and I'm talking about my country, tremendously. I mean, there are backlashes here and there. We can talk about them in the question and answer session. But still, I gave you the numbers, 71, 91. Last canton, you know, that would grant us the rights, 88, until 88. Female diplomats who couldn't even have a family or no right on a family. And look what we have achieved. Okay, the 27% in the parliament, they are not a real wow factor. But we only have 7 ministers, and that's a slim, efficient country, 7 ministers. And for a very short while, we had 4 women and 3 men. So we managed in only 40 years to have, and even if it was only for 6 months, a majority of women in the executive. We start now having daycare structures, which is totally new for us. And we are on the way to become a gender-balanced society. You know, nowadays, as a Swiss woman, I feel totally accepted, especially in the professional environment. This is a long way. And this is, I say it again, I think we came from far away. We did it fast, we did it in an efficient way. And who would have guessed that, right, about the Swiss? I told you it's not black and white. But let's come to the cultural gap. Ladies, you started all well ahead of the Swiss women. And I don't need to teach you a lesson about Atatürk. But what he did for the women in this country is unprecedented. What happened or did not happen after is the problem, or in my eyes, the cultural gap we have to overcome. You know, you had a modernizer against the conservative backland. How to overcome this gap? But it brings me to the third gap, which is the one that for me, as an observer, goes through the Turkish society. And I'm coming up with my biggest provocation. May I mention a black and white stereotype that includes both, actually all the three gaps that we have been mentioning? Well, how many times have I been told about the modern, emancipated, secular, stylish, and Kemalist women? This is the white part of my black and white equation. Against the backwarded, oppressed, religiously dressed, and conservative women. That's the black part of the occasion. Does it ring a bell to you? I mean, I have been here now for 16 months. You know, this is a typical stereotype you come across all the time. I come across all the time. From both sides, I don't blame anyone. But that's a stereotype, right? Well, now, let me tell you, I told you, I talk to everyone, and I talk to everyone on both sides of the gap. And I just mentioned before, I mean, this room is full of impressive women. I met so many incredible Turkish women. But believe me, the one that impressed me personally most, well, she's a member of the AK party. She is rigorously, religiously dressed. She is an amazingly successful businesswoman, a single mother who asked a divorce because she said, and I quote her, "My husband was useless." That's a courageous woman. And courage is what we need to succeed and to go against the mainstream. And this is what we should all do. Even so the cultural gap seems enormous, still, we have to overcome them. I hope that I showed you, the little Swiss girl from suburbia actually managed to get where she wanted to be. And even so we don't have a lot of female astronauts out there, I think I can be proud of what I achieved, let's say against all odds. Thank you so much.